Okay, we would like to start with gathering our energy and evoking our higher selves as we share this work today. And in our board meeting this week, Susan Lyons, who hopefully is going to show up, she's got a client right before, so she wasn't sure she'd be here on time, was going to read this beautiful poem, but I'm going to read it in lieu of her not being here. And it's a poem called A Prayer to Mother Earth, and the author is anonymous. We don't know who wrote it. Oh, mother, my tears fall upon your face. I just remembered we, the light workers, have returned to spread our web of love around you. From distant stars and galaxies, from lives past, present, and future, we come to guide your healing. We, the light workers, one soul to another, touch the hearts of many each day. With recognition, we laugh, smile, and cry. Our love is abundant, flowing, and shimmering. We, the light workers, in perfect joy, quietly expand unconditional love. Spin now ever so gently, Mother Earth, as you warm yourself, for we, the light workers, are back from eons of time behind and ahead. May love, laughter, and tears of joy rain now and forevermore upon your face. Okay. Yeah. So everybody be on mute, please. If you just joined, welcome. And I'm going to introduce our four authors to who will be speaking today about their experience as authors, as regression therapists, and the content perhaps of their chapters that they've written. And we're going to start with Anne Barham, who is retired as a licensed MFT because she moved out of state. She was in California for many years, and she's in Connecticut now. And I checked your website, and you're pretty much focusing primarily on regression therapy at this time. Is that correct? Is that what you're pretty much working on?
I had to unmute myself. Yeah, actually, I've been focusing on that for probably the past 22 years. So, yeah.
Okay, so thank you, and tell us about your chapter.
Okay. Yeah, so I did start out as a marriage and family therapist in California, and about 4 or 5 years into that, it came to me that there was definitely something more for me to be doing. And I say that I get billboards from God from time to time. So I got the billboard, which was, oh, you could do regression therapy. And shortly after that, Brian Weiss and Roger Wolger both came to a retreat center 30 minutes from my house to do week-long professional trainings within 6 months of each other. So it was like, obviously, the universe was supporting me in that. And so I have been doing past life regression work for about 26 years now. So I've been doing this a long, long time. Fascinating work. One of the things I love about it is change happens so fast for my clients. And having been a conventional therapist, to see the dramatic difference is really, it's really exciting. Also, I always wanted to incorporate more spiritual work into my counseling work. So this was certainly a way to do that. And it's always been a really large component of what I focus on. So I had been doing sessions both in person and remotely for many, many years. I had a client in London one day when I was still in California that was like, I want to come have a session with you, but I can't afford to come to California. And this is back when people were using Skype still. So she's like, can't you do it over Skype? And I'm like, no, it has to be in person. I need to, I need you to be here. And she's, please, she kept pleading with me. So I finally said, okay, let's give it a try. I won't charge you unless we really have a good session. And of course we had a, knock your socks off session. And it was like, oh my gosh, that opened it up to the entire world, which was delightful. So I was doing about 50-50 and then COVID hit. So it was like, guess what? We're going to be 100% remote now. And when I moved to Connecticut 3 years ago, I just continued to only do remote because that way I didn't have to maintain a separate office and all that, and it worked out great. So all my sessions are remote, and I have found that it works beautifully, which is always kind of amazing to me, but it does work great. What else do I want to say? Oh, I did have my own book published back in 2016. Ooh, I don't know if my camera will do it. Looks like this, The Past Life Perspective. And that was a really fun experience, going through the Simon & Schuster machine and going through all that, and realizing, because I had to do a lot of promotion, that actually I enjoyed doing TV and radio and all that kind of thing, which I had thought before, no, I'm an introvert. I can't do that kind of stuff. But I found out there's this whole other part of my personality that's really good at doing that. So it's like, okay, that's kind of cool. So the reason I wrote a chapter for our collaborative book was shortly after my book was published, I got a phone call from a fellow that wanted to gift a session to his brother-in-law because his brother-in-law had my book on his coffee table and they had talked about it, and the man was, just fascinated by the whole thing. And it turned out that the brother-in-law was a very celebrated Hollywood composer. And he ended up probably being one of my favorite clients ever, because he was the nicest man in the world. And I had walked into it kind of thinking, right, because actually I went down to Santa Barbara to work with him because I was on my way to LA for a TV thing anyway. Gorgeous house on the coast. He goes to Starbucks and gets one of every single pastry they had so that he'd be sure to have whatever I might want to eat at his house. It's just, he was that kind of guy. And it was like, and I had walked in with this assumption that he was going to probably be sort of an arrogant, and instead he was the nicest man in the world. And he went into the work really easily and quickly. And he wanted to find out about why he had this musical talent. What possibly had he been or done in a prior lifetime? And so we went into this lifetime where he was a musician in a little town in Germany, Leipzig. We're kind of, neither of us really related to that. And we go through the whole life story. And what ends up is that he does research that evening after we've gotten all the details from this lifetime. And he sends me an email the next day saying, I can hardly believe this, but it looks like I was Johann Sebastian Bach. And he said, I knew nothing about Bach's life. Of course, I knew of him as a composer, but I knew nothing about his life. And he was ticking off all the things that in the regression he brought up that indeed were details from Bach's life. So I thought this was a really good chapter to contribute to the book because of the research that he did and how he was able to validate the details that came up. And it was a really fun story. And it was one that happened after my book was published. So it's like, this one's got to get out there because it's just so much fun. So that was what inspired me to send that in and contribute it. And I also very much think that people learn so much through stories and parables and all that, that we need the didactic, but I think the stories really often bring things home for people in a way that doesn't happen otherwise. So good client stories are, I think, always great to contribute. What else to tell you? I think that's kind of it. I will wait and see if there's questions down the line, but otherwise, I think that's all I really was planning on saying.
Thank you. Okay, next is DeAnne Torres. And DeAnne is from Northern California. and she is one of our newest board certified regression therapists. So it was wonderful that we had some people who are new to our organization participate in the book, as well as people like Eric and Anne, who've been quite a long time involved with IBRT. And you'll also meet Yasmin, who's fairly new at being a board certified regression therapist, but that by no way means that they are new to regression therapy. So DeAnne?
Hello, everybody. Yep, my name is DeAnne Torres, and I actually began my hypnotherapy journey back in 2009. And it was like relearning a skill that I already knew but had forgotten, rather than learning something new. And at the same time, I began my shamanic apprenticeship with Hank Wesselman. And that was fascinating in and of itself, to do that at exactly the same time, to feel myself integrating my shamanic work with my journey with hypnotherapy. So when we started learning past life regression, I didn't want to just do past life regression. So I had my partner take me to a life that needed soul retrieval, because I was learning about soul retrieval. So I wanted to experience a life where my past self had had soul loss. From the shamanic perspective, that means whenever there's a trauma, part of us steps out. Part of us can't handle it because we need to focus on being able to survive. And so the part that steps out carries the imprint of that trauma because it's too much to deal with in the moment. And the idea being, of course, that when you're done through that traumatic experience and you're in a safe place, you're supposed to bring that energy back, to reintegrate it so that you can release the trauma and move on. But we don't know to do that. So when I was going through my past life regression training, I said, well, can we do past life soul retrieval? And I just said, let's just go do it. And we did. Most of it, I kind of backled because my partner didn't know what was happening, but it was a fascinating experience to not only be there, merged with my past self for part of it, but when my facilitating partner didn't know what to do, I stepped out within the regression and I said, I am DeAnne. I am here to help you. Well, this was back in ancient Greece. And so my past self thought I was the goddess Diana. And I didn't want to disabuse them of that notion because they were going to listen. Here's the goddess come to help me. And it kind of made me wonder, of whenever we see beings of light, are they really gods and goddesses and our angels, or are they our future selves who are coming to help us? That's an interesting question. So apologies to Diana if, I didn't want to offend, but this allowed me to be able to integrate my past self and help them move forward. And I thought that was fascinating. So I've always brought this blend of my shamanic work into my regression work, doing soul retrieval and helping my past selves and my clients' past selves to do integration work after their death and before they cross over. So it really wasn't a surprise when I started getting clients who brought in attachments, or clients whose past selves were ghosts and needed help to cross over. I've had quite a few that were still stuck in their death state, and those took a tremendous amount of work with beings from both sides of the veil to help them and to release that. But that's what I love about this work. It's fascinating. So, Holly mentioned that I'm new to IBRT. Ironically, I looked at the requirements well over a decade ago, and I thought, oh no, that's too much work. Those requirements to become certified, that's a lot. I don't know if I want to do it. And then a decade later, I went, I might as well. So that's why I'm new to the organization. Hello, but I'm not new to this work. So, and then I also trained with Dr. Michael Newton at the Newton Institute to do the Life Between Lives work. That was in 2011. And I volunteered with them, with that organization since 2013. I do love this, watching people come in, never knowing what's going to happen. It's a fascinating ride, and I am here for it. So I actually didn't prepare anything today because I thought I would wait for questions. But when I was thinking about what chapter, what did I want to contribute, I knew I wanted to do something that necessarily other people hadn't experienced or thought to ask about. And that would be, what do you do when it's not your client's past self they're seeing, but the attaching ghost's past life? Or if their past self was a ghost, and how do you help them cross over? So I hope you all enjoyed that chapter. And I'll just pause now and wait for questions.
Thank you. Great. Okay, I'm going to introduce Eric Christopher next. Eric and I met at an IART conference, probably, was it early 2000s, maybe? I don't know when you started, but I met you way back then. And you
Yeah.
have been a member for a long, long time. And Eric is also a licensed marriage family therapist, and he is living in Minnesota now.
Yeah.
And I highly recommend you look at his blog, because he
Mm.
has a lot of really interesting stories on his blog, some of which were, I think, incorporated into his chapter. So maybe you can give him your website. Everybody's websites are available on the IBRT therapist page as well. So welcome, Eric. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Holly, and thank you, everyone. It's an honor to be here with all these star players, all these star regressionists. This work is a passion of mine, and it has been. And because it's been a passion of mine over the years, I just want to put all kinds of case studies and content on my website. And I love it when people say, "Oh, I've never done a session with you, but I'm from New York and I've seen your website. Now I just got a lot out of it. Thanks." And it's like, oh, that's what I really wanted. And so I started out marriage and family therapy. And just as I was starting that program, I read the book Journey of Souls by Michael Newton. And when I read that, I just thought, that's what I want. That's what I want to do. And so, but it turned out, and so I knew I needed to get training with him before he retired, and I did in 2004 in Studio City, California. But one of my professors did past life regression, and he's the one. I ended up writing my master's thesis called "Exploring the Effectiveness of Past Life Regression," and that's what I did a big survey of all the people of IART at the time and such, and I was brand new to it. I didn't know what I was doing, or I had never had a past life regression. But then in 2000, I started going to all the conferences, and oh, I loved it, and I've been doing this work ever since. After I got my level 4 training and back in probably 2003, but one of my clients, after about 10 years of doing this work, I'm thinking, why is it that everyone sees just the life that's right and perfect for them to see? And I've noticed that, And then one of my clients was talking to their spirit guides, and their guides said something profound at the time, I thought. And I thought, my God, I've been trying to find a way to say this for 10 years, and you've just said it in one sentence. They said, just as the body's instinct is to breathe, the soul's instinct is to grow and evolve. And so therefore that made so much sense. That's why, oh, you go within and you just get whatever it is that you're needing. So I like to have my clients make a statement of intent for the inner journey. And of course, sometimes they can just say, show me a life I've lived before that's most impacting this life and is most helpful and beneficial. And that always works good too. But in the book, I gave 2 case examples. And one of them was a woman that came to me. She's 60 years old, and she's in tears because her mother had just died. And she was just finished, she just went past her 60th birthday, and she just had tears. I just need to know if my mother loved me because she never felt that way before. And it was so important for her. And, and you know, there's nothing I'm going to tell her. I can't really sit here and say, well, your mother probably really did love you, uh, even though she didn't show it. Well, yeah, maybe she gets that intellectually, but not at a body and subconscious mind level. Eh, But past life regression, I don't have to worry about that. Let's just take her to a past life. It's going to show her what she needs. And sure enough, she sees herself in England and a very wealthy family, a lot of children, has a special bond with one of the children, but uh, lo and behold, that child dies at the age of 9, and she is just crushed. And she's so crushed that she can't, doesn't have any, she's too riddled with grief and loss that she is unable to be fully present with the rest of the children the way she needed them to be, the way they needed her to be. When that life is over, she's in the soul realm and she realizes, oh gosh, I really wish I had been there for my children. And then all of a sudden a light bulb comes up. Oh my gosh, that's exactly the way my mother was with me. She she was full of her own trauma. She didn't know how to be with me in the way that I needed her to be. And it just, it just clicked. But in that higher vibration state, she got it at more than an intellectual level, as we all know with this. She got it at a whole body, mind, soul level. And then so she a couple of weeks later, she sent me this long email, and I included an excerpt of it in the book. But it's just how at a deep level now she knows at a deep level how much her mother loved her, and knowing is the only thing she could think of to say, the only word, but it changed her life. Well, as you go within, you get what you need. That's the theme of this type of work. And my other example in the book that I give is a woman who came to me with such anxiety and fear, because every time her newborn baby cried, she get these chest tightening fears, and she wanted to try past life regression. And and in and I think we are both kind of thinking, well, she'll probably go to a life where her baby died or something like that. But no, she goes to a life where she's in a military officer, World War One, decorated, and from England, and she had to give the orders to many, to many men to run, and gave orders basically that resulted in the deaths of all of these men. And when the war was over, uh, this officer, went and visited many of the homes of the soldiers that died that under his command, and he felt very guilty. And he saw all of the fatherless homes he created, and the widows, and he became embittered. And towards the end of that life, she describes very eloquently how she can't take in anyone's love. And only when, and he became this kind of mean and grumpy man. And she said, he said, I don't treat my wife very well, and I think about Jesus a lot. And when, only after the soul left the body and went to the state around for the funeral, that's the only time you could take in the love. And the soul said, from the vantage point of the soul, she said, yeah, I had to do a lot of bad stuff to get those medals. If I thought that if anyone knew what I had done, there's no way that they would like me or love me. Had such heavy shame. Then when we moved up into the higher, in the spiritual realm, and the higher you go into the spiritual realm, the more clarity and insight dropped in. And then she started seeing things, be able to say a lot of wisdom from her higher self, could see where the connection went, was able to energetically release the fears that came in, or all of the yeah, the fears that came in every time she could see the connections. And it was a wonderful session. And again, she emailed me about several months after the session and said that, yeah, all of those fears had gone away. And uh, and when I saw her 5 years later, she said, oh yeah, after that session, everything was, all of those fears had gone away. And so it just, you never know what the source of something can be, but your own higher mind does. Um, I'd like to share a couple of other examples. These are some of my favorites. I just had a guy come last summer, and he saw a life no, it was in Europe somewhere, a couple hundred years ago. He lived in a clan. He said, this is an idyllic life because there's plenty of food. The clan felt like one big family, and it was a perfect life up until the last 45 seconds of it, because the village got raided, and he comes out of his hut. There's chaos, screaming, fear, and he gets a knife right, and a sword right in his chest. And that's how he died. When the life is over, he moves up into the soul realm, and he's able to say, at some point he said, oh, that that must explain why I've had this pain, the phantom pain in my chest my whole life. And it's more than a phantom pain. It's like this impending feeling of doom. Later on, he said he had been on medications for 30 years on that. Well, as we use the Roger Wolger technique of pulling out that sword and releasing all the trauma and getting back, replacing it with light and love, healing energy. And he said that pain is gone. And he was going to come back a month later to do a life between life session. And I said, when you come back in a month, I'll bet you $100. I didn't really bet him, but I said, that'll be gone. And yeah, it was. And then after the life between life session he did with me, he emailed me 2 weeks, or no, about a month after that, and said he weaned himself off of all of those medications. And and yeah, he sleeps so much better at night. He's feeling great. No more fears. Well, there's an example, you see, of how how we can have a physical, mental, and emotional energy bodies, and the energy can get stuck and caught in all those energy bodies. But I want to share that case example with a different case example quickly, just to show how it's not easy. It's not necessarily, how that cut and dry. I had a medical doctor come to me he had a frozen shoulder, left shoulder, couldn't raise his left shoulder. He had, we live near the Mayo Clinic near Rochester. That's an hour away. And he had been to the Mayo Clinic many times. He'd even tried all kinds of alternative therapy techniques many times. Nothing worked. And of course, I'm the last stop on the list, as many of us are with this type of work. And well, he saw himself in a past life where he was a really strong, buff Roman soldier, and he was left-handed in that life because he knew he carried a shield in one hand, and with his left hand he was a killing machine, and he was really good at what he did. He put out all these peasant uprisings, and again, killed a lot of people, created a lot of fatherless homes. And when that life was over, he's up into the soul realm in that higher vibration, and the insights start dropping in and saying, and he says, I think my frozen shoulder has something to do with all the killing I did. And that was maybe why he was a doctor in this life. But anyway, I just had him, since everything is energy and we're all interconnected ultimately, I just had him call upon all the souls that he had harmed and apologize. And of course, what comes back is just, hey, you're just being a blind human. It's okay. All is forgiven. He could feel all is forgiven. When the session was over, he's able to raise his arm right up. And I saw him at a talk 3 years later of a talk by Larry Dossey on the power of all these triple blind studies on the power of prayer. But anyway, 3 years later, he comes up to me and raises his arm and he says, Eric, that's the only thing that ever helped. So what I love about this type of work is I always tell my clients this, I don't know if you may see a traumatic life, you may see a fantastic life, because sometimes, gosh, I've had people with such low self-esteem and they want to see the life that's the source of that. And they think they're going to see a life where they're an orphan and they're spit on and kicked on. And instead they see a powerful life where they're in this indigenous tribe and they're feeling such a connection to earth and spirit, and they never felt unconditional love was almost like the air they breathed, and they never felt negative beliefs about themselves. So you never know if you're going to see a life like that, a fantastic life, or a challenging life, or a super boring life. Many times those have soul lessons, but I always tell my clients, whatever comes to you is exactly what you're supposed to see. And as you go within, you get what you need. And so I love talking about this stuff. So I think I'll be quiet now and save the rest for questions and let other people have a chance to talk.
Thank you, Eric.
Sure.
And our last author is Yasmin Udwadia. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. You can say it for us. And Jasmine is also a new board certified regression therapist, and she is in North Vancouver, British Columbia.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. It's a pleasure to be here, Holly. Thank you. So, as Holly introduced me, I'm a hypnotherapist. I currently live in North Vancouver, Canada. I was born in Bombay, India, and I grew up with a very different background in the sense that, India is a place where everyone is so open to spirituality and to all the possibilities. So I was exposed to a lot of yoga and different healing modalities, etc., at a young age. I took a hypnosis workshop out of curiosity, and as it so happens, the instructor dropped me into the chair and proceeded to do a demonstration on me. And I was so fascinated by what happened. I was frozen. I had catalepsy. I was a very good subject, obviously, that I came out of it completely taken by the process. And long story short, I went on to study hypnosis, past life regression, life between lives, also with the Newton Institute. And my practice revolves mostly around past life regression, life between lives, and also Simpson protocol sessions. It's another amazing technique to help clients to address their issues. I also do a fair bit of spirit release. I think that is just a part of what we need to do. Past life regression remains one of my favorite techniques as it has such a great impact on clients. In the book, I have written my chapters called The Role of Spiritual Guides in a Past Life Regression. So having witnessed so many amazing regressions as so many of us have, it never ceases to amaze me how profound these sessions can be, often life-changing for the client. And I wanted to write about this topic because for many people who are curious, especially newcomers to past life regression, they may not understand what this term means, who are spiritual guides, how do we access this guidance in a session, etc. How does it play out? So I thought I'd address it. So I have mentioned the key points in my chapter about why spiritual guides or guidance is important and relevant to past life therapy. And of course, how the wisdom and understanding comes to us in the session, as well as the connections that we make about the past life that we see and the current life today. I do stress that spiritual guides or guidance, there are a lot of different ideas and theories about it, but broadly, we classify them as beings of a higher vibration or consciousness. And we may interpret or see or encounter these guides in different ways. So some of us may, as you know, see them as our own personal spirit guides. Some may experience them as ascended masters like Buddha or Jesus or Krishna. I've had many clients see their loved ones, ancestors also guiding them. archangels, angels, and animal spirits. Also, some may perceive these as aspects of their own higher self or higher power. So whatever form this guidance takes, I found that it's extremely empowering, and real guidance always comes from and emanates unconditional love and support for the client in the session. So I have a few examples that I would like to talk about, uh, especially related to the ways guides assist in a session. As Eric mentioned, in all the years of practice, I have never had a client who experienced a past life that was something they were not ready for, not able to handle, and also something that is relevant always to their current life and issues. So this guidance, whatever way we term it, offers us support, comfort, protection, will only allow information to be revealed if it serves us and when the time is right. So I'll talk about a client who I will call Larry. And this was one of the very interesting sessions that I had. So he came to me for a past life session, and later I found out, he didn't tell me at the time, that he has a bias towards a particular nation and ethnicity and people because they have oppressed his own countrymen. Anyway, he regresses to a past life where he saw himself as a very cruel commander of the very same nationality and ethnicity that he doesn't tolerate in this life. And he found also that he killed many people, he was cruel, exerted power and influence. And we went through the life, we saw the important events, and following the death scene when he found his soul self moving through space, drifting, he senses his guide, and he feels very supported, loved, comforted, also felt his grandparents' presence. And then he says to me that he feels deep remorse, and his guide is telling him and giving him the understanding now that what he did was wrong, the killing was wrong, especially he should not have ever hated anyone, as we are all one. His words, not mine. And amongst the several messages that he reports back to me from his guide explained that this time around, as Larry, he was born extremely sensitive. He's very easily hurt. He told me he couldn't even hurt an ant. And he needed these characteristics so that he could fully experience the opposite of who he was in the past life. He was also shell-shocked completely to see himself as belonging to the same race that he currently has this deep bias for. Again, his guide told him it was necessary to view because it was time for perspective, and he needed to let go completely of hate and recognize that we are all one. So that was the underlying message for him. And he came out of the session completely, really, really impacted in a wonderful way. It was one of those sessions that had the most radical and instant result, altering a client's worldview for the better. Another example of a session where guides really played a big role was the one that I mentioned in my book. And in the book in my chapter, I write about my client, Rowan. So the past life is quite long and lengthy. I won't get into that right now. But at the end of the session, when Rowan moves through the death scene, his guide showed up as a white horse and said his name was Speeder. And now Rowan received a lot of messages and guidance about his past life, his current life purpose, and more. And after the session, on his way home, he saw a statue of a white horse head in a window. And a few days later, he wrote to me. He sent me pictures actually of the white horse head. And he also sent me a picture of two women walking a white pony down a busy street in Vancouver. Now, that was such validation for both him and for me. So I've found in a lot of sessions that guides play out, not only giving these signs and symbols in the session, but also validating them in the client's physical life. And I thought that's really interesting because when our conscious mind sometimes, kicks in and starts that little chatter, especially after the session, it happens to many clients, it's happened to me too. When something like this happens, it really drives the point home that the session was what we needed. And there's more than meets the eye, right? Another client of mine received a message from his guide during his session that he needed to visit a particular holy place in order to complete a karmic cycle. Now, in his current life, he has no affinity to this holy place, nor to the religion it serves. And he emerged from the session, and while we were debriefing, we discussed this message, and he had absolutely no idea what it was all about. So he left my office, and a few minutes later, he called me, and he says to me that during our session together, he had received 6 missed calls from an unknown number, and he called the number back, and it turns out they were from an event manager inviting him to perform at the same place that he had been told to visit in his session just a few minutes before. Now, what are the chances of this happening, right? So guidance and the role of guides is so important in our past life regression. I'd like to emphasize that it really doesn't matter what name we attach to it, what form this guidance appears to us as in our clients. We all have access to higher guidance, whatever form, whatever name we may call it. We do not need to be religious or spiritual or even have previous experience with hypnosis. Most clients have good, wonderful experiences in their first session itself. And lastly, of course, past life regression is something that is very subjective. The interpretation of this is very subjective and very personal to clients. So I always tell them, if you really want to know what it's about, you have to experience it for yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, we're going to open up for questions or comments. You can unmute yourself if you'd like to share. Everybody can unmute. If your dogs start barking, you can mute up again. So who has questions or comments to share? I can't see everybody all at once here. No. Nobody?
Ollie, I have a question.
Yes, Judy.
Um,
Who do you want to ask the question?
this is, well, it can be any one of the authors for this one. I'm assuming, because I heard a lot of you say that you were a therapist of some sort before you got into past life regression. And so my question pertains to the fact that I'm working with psychotherapists who do EMDR, and I'm tutoring them on how to use past life regression through EMDR for their clients. There's one in particular that I work with that has a client who has seen 10 different therapists in the past, and nothing seems to be releasing her hold on her mother, who passed away about six months or so before. This is 10 therapists in 6 months. She doesn't believe in past life regression, the client. Have any of you had any experiences where you've had a client like that? And what did you do in order to get them to go there?
So let me jump in. I haven't had a client who's done that, but since you're talking with someone who uses EMDR, there's an application of EMDR that I trained in that's called Induced After Death bring the client to a point where they actually are communicating with the soul of whoever passed,
Okay.
in a way that the client is absolutely positively convinced that this is not a hallucination, it's not their imagination, that they really have been talking to that individual. So that might be something that that particular client who's so stuck on her mother, if she can actually talk to her, and have that experience, that might help release that for her.
And what did you call that again, Anne?
It's induced after death communication.
Okay.
There's a book. I'd have to look on let me look on my shelf, and I can maybe put that information in the chat or something. Because the fellow that created it wrote a book. He's not in practice anymore, but there's still people that are teaching how to do that. And, yeah.
Okay.
So that's what I would throw out there.
Okay. Well, they might know about it already, but yeah.
It's a little obscure, but it is pretty powerful. I'll look on my bookshelf while we're talking. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not able to see everybody on my screen, so if someone's raising their hand and I don't see you, please just speak up.
Okay, I actually have a thought. I'm not a therapist, so I haven't had work with people who don't already believe in the work that we're doing. But if she's so stuck with that one individual, would she be open to something like soul releasement? Because I'm wondering if that's mother still stuck in her energy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to speak to the therapist about that. Yeah.
Because that's almost something that you can do. I don't want to impose on anybody's integrity, but that is almost something that you can do in such a way that they're not even fully cognizant of what you're actually doing. If you're really crafty and skillful. But yeah, that would be, anyway, that's my thought.
Or you might want to ask the client, does it feel, it does intuitively, does it feel like your mother is just around you all the time, or does you feel her energy, or if she's open to that kind of conversation, and that might give
And sometimes we hold people here as well. So maybe if she's got something that's has not been communicated or feels unfinished about her relationship, she could do hypnosis and then release her mom.
Right.
Goes both
but
ways.
given that she does EMDR, I've heard of the after death communication. I know someone that does it here in the Twin Cities, and I would, if she's open to the route what Anne was suggesting, I think that would be really helpful.
Sounds promising. Yeah.
Is she open to hypnosis or hypnotherapy at all?
The client just does EMDR. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Say, because that's easy to do in hypnosis. It's quite easy to. So, okay.
Okay, somebody has a hand raised and there's no name. It's a 350435. Whoever you are has a hand raised.
Hi, it's me. And I took the shamanism program and a lot of Reiki classes and stuff with you. So I'm not totally inexperienced, but I do have a experience I want to share to you before I even got into shamanism, because I'm an empath, and this might help somebody who doesn't want to have a past life regression, but maybe they could talk to someone who did and they could realize it. So anyway, my brother was a severe alcoholic, and I took care of him his whole life. And when he died, he wouldn't leave. And I knew he was there. He was on my back. He was on my back for 18 months. And I kept on telling him to go home, go home. And I wasn't a shaman then. And that's when I decided, really, I prayed to the universe, to be quite honest. You guys could understand this. And like the next day, literally the next day, I'm walking down Grand Avenue in Oakland, and there's a tarot reader, and we were trying to find this restaurant. I stuck in. I go, if anybody knows where this restaurant is, you do. And she says, who's that standing behind you? And she sold me right there. So I got rid of my husband, and I went back, and we had 3 sessions. And it was absolutely phenomenal. It was one of the most beautiful things in my life. And the fact that first she put my head in a sound bowl, asked me what I see. I saw my brother in a wheelchair and laughing at me, laughing at life and everything, just what he did. So then for 3 nights, she would meditate with me when I went to bed and went into my dreams. And the first one was past life, and we didn't get along in a past life. The second one, all my ancestors came in a circle and bonded with me. I'm from a farming town, and they all had pitchforks and everything. And then the last one, it felt so peaceful afterwards. It was unbelievable. So he went away. He went away. So I went back to her for the bowl thing again at the very end. And I saw him raising up to heaven with the angels with their wings all open, accepting him in. And it was very dramatic. It was very beautiful. So I think if you had someone who had an experience like that to relay it to somebody, and they could tell you emotionally what it was like. But my question is very, very basic because I read a lot of stuff. And this is kind of like elementary. But every time I read something, it's a different saying. And so what I'm asking you is, can your soulmate be on the earth with you? Your guides are not on the earth, okay? But your soulmate. And then secondly, can you be like a doppelganger? Can you split your soul? And there's 2 of you, I've read this too, running around. And so I just want anybody to answer that question. So just to clarify it. That's it.
Any responses?
I'll start with the second question. Can you split your soul? Okay. Are you familiar with Dr. Newton's work with like the oversoul field?
No.
Okay, so think of it this is how he put it. Think about your soul as being like the actor. Okay, your oversoul, I'm going to use that term, oversoul, is like an actor who takes on different roles. But our souls can't bring the entirety of their energy into the physical body. It would short circuit the body's neurological systems. So he found through his work over 30 years that souls take anywhere from 25% to 70% of their energy into incarnation, which means the rest of their energy stays up there in the spirit world. Some souls then can have 2 concurrent lives going at the same time. Okay, now that doesn't mean that they need to find each other. This is not a soulmate. This is not a twin flame. It just means that your soul is having 2 different roles, 2 different movies, 2 different life characters being played at the same time. Okay, so I'm wondering if that's what you meant about splitting your soul. Is that accurate?
Yeah, two of you on the earth together. So somewhere, and I don't know if you'll ever meet that person, and that'll be your soulmate, or
No.
whatever, No. But the guides,
No.
I got the guides. It's just that every time I read something, somebody always clarifies it differently, and that there is no soulmate. That's just a new proverb. So
well, the other thing to look at, and I'll give somebody else just let me real quick, and then I'll let someone else answer that. So a soulmate, if you think of it as like the British or Australian term, mate, they're your friends, they're your buddies, they're your soul family who are also incarnated with you. That's why you recognize somebody. You see them, you're like, oh, I know you. Okay, that doesn't mean that it needs to be a romantic relationship. It just means they are your soul family that you recognize. And so there can be many different soulmates, soul friends, soul family who are here with you, or few, depending on how they incarnated. Okay, and I'll let somebody else answer them.
Just 2 days ago, I had a woman come in, wanted to do past life regression because she had met a friend, woman friend. They're both heterosexual, but they were really, they just felt like they both knew each other so well, and knew everything about one another. She felt like intuitively like they had been twins in a different life. But they were friends, and what happened, they were roommates for a while, but then one of them decided, okay, they still are friends, but they're just going to move out just because they needed to be on their own for a while. So the one friend moved away, only 40 minutes away, but a tremendous amount of grief and a feeling of abandonment that she just couldn't shake, my client. So she came to me wondering what is behind this out of proportion grief and abandonment that I feel. Well, she did regress back to a life where they were twins, and they were really tight. But the age of 13, the one became really ill and actually died with her head in the lap of the other twin. And there was such a strong feeling of grief and abandonment at that time. And they kind of made a vow that I'm not going to be apart from you again. And so it didn't mean, but since then she saw, once we were in the soul realm and she could see the wisdom of the soul realm, she could see that, yeah, they had other lives together. And then they had other lives since then apart. But yet there was always this, in the lives that there was apart, there was a feeling of something's missing. And that was that sense of this deep soul connection that she had with this woman there. And so I would agree also with DeAnne that, yeah, we have like a, you can find all kinds of things. That's why I love reading about, the afterlife and such, because you see this way of seeing things. Most of the time they all overlap, but sometimes there's a little different. But in the Michael Newton talked about, yeah, soul groups and such, and we can have soul groups, and so sometimes like a soulmate could be someone from that soul group.
Thank
I
you.
just thought I would throw that out there.
Thank you. I got a flu cold, so that's why I'm not showing my face. You don't want to see it.
More questions? Again, I can't see everybody. I've got about half of you on my screen. Virginia? Oops, you're on mute. There you go.
Okay. I would like to ask DeAnne Torres a little bit more about the idea of blending past life regression with shamanic work. Was this something that you came up with on your own, the idea of doing this, or I'd just like to expand a little bit on that, if you don't mind.
Okay, sure. I can't say that I was taught it directly by anybody, but I also can't say that I'm the only one to ever have thought of it. I mean, if I did, I'm sure other people out there must have. But I am working on a book. But so can you give me a little more specific what you want to know, Virginia?
Well, you mentioned doing a soul retrieval on the past life personality.
Yeah.
So going to a past life where that personality needs to do a soul retrieval.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, if you think about it, every life needs it, because there's always something that we all experience as traumatic. So every life needs it. So when you think about the I call them energy distortions. Okay, like someone dies with the deep thought of like, okay, who was it who said the killing? Was that you, Eric? The left hand, the guy, he was a killing machine, right?
Yeah.
And so there's this energy distortion that follows. It doesn't mean it's karma, it doesn't mean it's punishment, but there's something traumatic about that. And that gets carried forward. So then the work that I do, what I've encouraged, not the word encourage, brought in, is that we go through the death of the past self with the client still merged. We speed it up, and then after the death, they're still merged with their past self. And at that point, I have them do some releasement of anything heavy, resentment, rage, guilt, shame. I have them, like, I use basic NLP language. What color is it? What shape is it? Does it have a texture? Does it have a form? Where is it? And have them pull it out and leave it in their body. leave it in the body that died, right? And so by the time that past self has released all this heaviness and stuff and things that aren't theirs, their energy kind of looks like Swiss cheese. So I say, well, now let's go find your joy. Where was, all the parts of you that stepped out in this life that you left behind? Call them, like a magnet receiving, these fireflies of light that is your energy. So they're filled up. And sometimes we have to do more intensive soul retrieval, like when they've had, like a serious soul loss experience. I will have the past self and the client is still merged with them. After we do that work, we go back in time as they are now, as that being of light, to that past self's past self, and do some retrieval work there. So they're integrated. Did that make sense? Because I'm trying to.
It does, actually, because I know a little bit of shamanic practice, and my colleague is a shamanic practitioner, and I was just wondering, I love that idea. I think it's brilliant. And I was like, how could we, because I'm also an instructor, how could I teach my students to blend that in? And have her come in and work with them. I got to work on that. That's brilliant.
It's actually quite easy to do. And that's what I do at the end with all of my sessions. I take them through that and then all the way to the gate of or the portal to the spirit world. And then I have the client step out so that they get to see their past self crossover. We do an exchange of blessings, and then they can have a chance to talk to their guide right there, their oversoul right there, before the client comes back. But that is actually very easy to do. And I am in the process of writing a book, but I'd be happy to share information, Virginia, if you want to talk to me. Okay.
I wouldn't mind hearing more about that.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
More questions?
Can I say one more thing, Holly? This is Judy. I just want to thank you guys for writing this book. I have read a lot of past life regression books in my time, and I got to tell you, this is one of the best. It's just phenomenal. And I'd like to thank Yasmin for working with spiritual guides, because I work with them day in and day out with my clients. And I'd like to thank DeAnne, because the work that you're doing is absolutely fascinating.
Wonderful.
So thank you guys for putting this book together.